Established in 1994 by the government of the Bahamas, Parliamentary Channel 40 broadcasts gavel-to-gavel coverage of the proceedings of both houses of Parliament, providing up-to-date information, including live interviews and historical data on the workings of one of the most important branches of government.
I'm Anthony Newbold. Welcome to the Parliamentary Channel's live coverage of the House of Assembly today. Members expected to continue and complete debate on the Stem Cell Research and Therapy Bill. Hopefully, they will complete it. Also, in committee stage, the National Training Agency Bill. That was debated the last time they met. Of course, the National Training Agency was opened on Monday by the Prime Minister and the Minister of Labor. New director, Agatha Marcel. That is in committee stage, as is the Homeowners Protection Bill. That's in committee stages as well. So, complete debate on the stem cell research and therapy. Take that into committee and hopefully pass that along with those two other bills. We don't know what else could be on the agenda this morning, but we know for sure those three bills are on the agenda. As we normally do, we're going to give you a recap of what happened the last time members met. In 1973, at this time, before we go to that recap, members were not in the House of Assembly. In fact, they left on June the 25th, did not return until October. And when they did, the House had a slightly different look because a couple people who were there earlier were not there, and some new people were there. But back to today, stem cell research, when members begin their session today. But let's go back to the last time they met. Here's Carla Palmer with a recap of the morning session.
Last met on July 3rd. The Stem Cell Research and Therapy Bill 2013 was central to the debate. It's being described by the government as record-breaking, pioneering and revolutionary. Legislators anticipate once enacted into law, the bill will change the landscape of the Bahamas, catapulting the healthcare sector to new heights in the process. Introducing the second reading of the bill, Health Minister, the Honorable Dr. Perry Gomez, says since the bill was first tabled in the House of Assembly back on April 10th this year, the government has engaged in widespread consultation with stakeholders. A longtime advocate of the process, Dr. Gomez underscores the importance of this piece of legislation.
This enabling legislation that has been embraced in the mainstream by the news media has created a renewed interest in the potential benefits of medical tourism to positively impact the GDP of the Bahamas. For honorable members of this House, this bill can be a defining moment in the history of Parliament because by its enactment, it will cause the scientific and professional environment in the Bahamas to take a quantum leap in the future delivery of medical care in our country. As a result of this, the overall quality of health practices in the country would by necessity improve to the benefit of all Bahamians. In addition to the direct higher paying jobs created in the healthcare industry resulting from the passage of this bill, it is expected that there will be a considerable number of other jobs which would be an indirect spin-off from this action. For instance, tourism-related jobs, hotel workers, taxis, drivers, security officers, caretakers, etc.
The bill outlines the requirements including licensing, accreditation, and regulations, as well as indicating prohibited procedures to ensure any unethical practices.
This legal framework will create a regulatory regime covering all aspects of stem cell research, namely clinical research, in other words, testing stem cells in people, 2, non-clinical research, which includes bench research in labs, as well as non-human animal research, and 3, therapeutic uses in people. The framework will prohibit and deter procedures that are unethical or scientifically unfounded, such as human reproductive procedures and human cloning.
Dr. Gomez explains that stem cell research involves rejuvenating reproductive tissue, replacing damaged cells resulting in regrowth.
Stem cells are precursors to mature cells. Their ability to duplicate themselves and to become various kinds of cells give them the great potential for healing injuries and regenerating tissues.
According to Dr. Gomez, the government has left no stone unturned in the crafting of this bill.
The proposed Stem Cell Research and Therapy Act and proposed regulations would create a strict oversight regime to ensure that no prohibited procedures occur in the Bahamas and that stem cell research and therapy here complies with the highest scientific and ethical standards. A significant component of that regime is that every facility or laboratory used for stem cell research or therapy must obtain a license under the Hospital and Healthcare Facilities Act. This provision will subject all those facilities and labs to inspections by individuals with appropriate qualifications, which the Minister of Health has authority to specify by regulations. The provision will also subject those facilities and laboratories to fees set by the Minister of Health, which will be used to cover the costs necessary to hire and train qualified inspectors. Another important component of the oversight regime involves committee review. Every person who conducts research on or provides treatment using stem cells must secure a review by a scientific review committee and an ethics committee. Each scientific review committee must ensure that a sound scientific basis exists for permitting the proposed research or therapy to proceed. It will also ensure that the individuals proposing to conduct stem cell research or therapy have appropriate training and experience. In short, this review will weed out unethical rogue scientists. The ethics committees will ensure that all stem cell research and therapy meet the highest ethical standards and are consistent with Bahamian values.
Member of Parliament for Pinewood, the Honorable Kalis Roll, seconded the bill in support. He views the bill as one of the most significant pieces of legislation brought by the Progressive Liberal Party administration. Mr. Roll says, with cost a barrier to good health care, it's important that the government explore alternatives in the interest of the Bahamian people.
I believe that all manner of positive opportunities are associated with stem cell therapy. And, Mr. Speaker, one can argue the pros and cons of stem cell research and treatment to infinity. No matter where you stand on the argument, the question has to be asked, Mr. Speaker, what is the controversy all about? Stem cells can be contrasted with differentiated cells, Mr. Speaker, and that is they have not been defined as yet, and they can morph into whatever you want them or need them to be. They offer much hope for medical advancement because of their ability to grow into almost any kind of cell. And as an example, neural cells in the brain and spinal cord that have been damaged can be replaced by stem cells, Mr. Speaker. And in the treatment of cancer, cells destroyed by radiation or chemotherapy can be replaced with new healthy stem cells that adapt to the affected area. Whether it be a part of the brain, the heart, liver, lungs, or wherever. Dead cells of almost any kind, no matter the type of injury or disease, can be replaced with new healthy cells, thanks to the amazing flexibility of stem cells. And because of this, Mr. Speaker, billions of dollars are being poured into this field globally.
Opposition leader, the Honorable Dr. Hubert Minnis, does not support the stem cell and therapy bill. While he says he is science-driven and his focus is always on improving health care, He says he is not convinced that the government is up to the task of enforcing the proposed regulations to stop any unethical behavior.
For many sound reasons, I do not believe that the Bahamas ought to be involved in stem cell research at this time. The Bahamas has yet to receive an ideal primary health care services for its citizens, where they live, whether in New Providence, Grand Bahama, or other family islands. We have only recently updated emergency and operating theaters in Grand Bahama. The critical care unit at Princess Margaret Hospital is still under construction. We can hardly hope that the prescription drug program will be expanded by this government to bring increased relief to the neediest in our society, the elderly, the infirmed, and children, those who are forced sometimes, to choose between buying food and buying medicine, paying their electricity bills or buying medicine, paying their rent or mortgages or buying medicine. Indeed, Mr. Speaker, we are plagued by many healthcare issues, an epidemic of chronic non-communicable diseases, public health issues, and a medical staff shortages, particularly in our family islands, especially in the far southern islands of the Bahamas. They in the south cry for help. And we are being severely challenged by other social, financial, and economic issues that all require the timely, focused attention of the government. Our people are crying for help. Social issues, economic issues. How so challenged a small government can expect to develop the necessary legislation and regulatory oversight for some of the most advanced medical scientific research taking place today? That boggles the mind, Mr. Speaker. It boggles my mind. Stem cell research and therapy, if it is to be safe, ethical, and respected by the international medical profession, must meet international standards and protocols. This requires that the country hosting the research must have enforceable laws and be capable of providing the necessary monitoring by recognized specialists in the subspecialty field. Enforceable laws, most important, enforceable laws and monitoring. Mr. Speaker, I do not understand why the rush by the government to bring this bill to Parliament to regulate a medical research field in which we have no expertise.
A trained medical doctor by profession, Dr. Minnis refutes the government's claim of having conducted widespread consultation.
I have had discussions with members of our medical fraternity. Many remain today unaware of the present stem cell legislation and regulation being debated. And in fact, at the meeting in Medical Association, less than 10 individuals were present. Discussions among the more senior physicians in our country revealed the following concerns. 1, need for and lack of capacity to provide proper monitoring. 2, concern with the traditional weak enforcement of laws. 3, quantifying the stem cell knowledge and experience of committee members. 4, whether this legislation is being pushed to benefit special interest groups. The membership criteria for this group is inadequate. As outlined in this bill, give the high degree of technological competence required. In the U.S., Mr. Speaker, this responsibility lies with the FDA that has numerous resources, indefinitely more resources than trained personnel. Example, microbiologists, molecular biologists, geneticists, physicists, statisticians who review results, analyze clinical outcome. more than we could ever hope to have or even attract to our shores. In 2002, Mr. Speaker, in 2002, Canada realized the problems they could encounter with stem cell research, set up similar guidelines and agencies as in the U.S. with responsibility to approve, oversee, enforce, and regulate these research. All investigational products are required to undergo a thorough review process as the sponsor prepares to study safety and effectiveness of the product in adequate and well-controlled human studies. We have no protocols or organizations that can confirm the safety of such products. The FDA, on the other hand, has published comprehensive requirements of donor tissue practice, screening and testing requirements to prevent the introduction, transmission, and speed of communicable diseases. Mr. Speaker, how can such a committee, as outlined in this bill, be compared to that of the FDA or the relevant agencies in Canada? How could the committee to be created by this bill hope to satisfactorily fulfill the mammoth task associated with international standards of regulations, monitoring, and enforcement of stem cell research therapy? Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, in the Bahamas, we have no regulatory bodies that regulates our pharmaceutical products. And so we depend on FDA approval, European or UK approval. Now, as I listen today, for stem cell, we want to bypass these international organizations and create a local approval committee, a committee reporting to a politician, the minister. Which minister in this honorable house is a microbiologist, a geneticist, molecular biologist, or physicist? Which minister has a subspecialty in stem cell and is qualified and experienced to appropriately manage this committee?
Dr. Minnis was, however, heavily criticized by members of the government for not only his reference material used during the debate, a 2012 edition of Good Housekeeping magazine, but also the article which referred to a 14-year-old study. Those criticizing felt, at the very least, he should have used a scientific or medical journal.
The member for Killarney is being quite disingenuous. It was under their administration that obviously this reputation has developed. And it is under our administration where we're bringing a legislative framework to Parliament and to the country to cause for this to be properly regulated, monitored, and advanced. So he should be congratulating this side for repairing the damage that he, as the Minister of Health, caused in this regard.
Thank you, Honourable Member.
Member of Parliament for South Abaco, Mr. Edison Key, is embracing the proposed legislation.
You know, while this is something new, it could be something great.
To illustrate his point, Mr. Key showcased an avocado tree from his garden.
I planted a seed from another avocado a year ago in a pot with soil, which sprung up, and I grafted a bud from a bearing tree into that seedling. This plant you see here is not the seedling. It is from the bearing tree that I grafted the bud into. This is automatically a bearing tree of a different variety, a different species, a different taste, a different size. So I thought this would be ideal after you're discussing stem cell therapy to present this here this morning so the people of the Bahamas could see what can be produced from a form of stem cell.
Further, Mr. Key says the overall concept of the stem cell procedure could also be used to advance the Bahamas' position in the agriculture sector.
You can develop 10,000 trees from this one tree by grafting. I learned this over 30 years ago. Also, you can do it with citrus or any type of fruit tree that you want to mass produce. And this could be the means of self-sufficiency in food for the Bahamas. by producing tens of thousands of trees of different varieties and producing all the food we need for the Bahamas and to export food.
Also contributing to the debate was Member of Parliament for Marco City, Mr. Gregory Moss.
And this is what I love about this party. This party is large enough and secure enough that we can speak widely on issues. And all I would commend to the honourable member for North Andros and the Berry Islands for this great effort. One or two areas, little areas of concern that I have, and it may simply be that this is not my area of expertise, but only this, and it's the section 6 section of the bill. Section 6(1)(d), Mr. Speaker. It seems to allow the conduct of research involving an in vitro embryo for more than 14. It only prohibits the conduct of research on in vitro embryo for more than 14 days following creation, which seems to suggest that you can conduct the investigation on an in vitro embryo, human embryo, for under 14 days. I'm a little concerned about that, and 6(1)(d). It's now providing what is prohibited. No person shall engage in research or therapy that seeks to, in the middle, conduct research involving an in vitro embryo for more than 14 days following its creation. I personally have a challenge with any experimentation on any human embryo ever, not just up to after 14 days, but ever. And so I speak my conscience on this matter, that I think that to allow any research on any in vitro human embryo, and if you notice the end of that D, it allows that period to be extended so long as you put the embryo in suspension, which causes a little concern for me. And I speak there as a matter of conscience, Mr. Speaker. And 6(1)(g) seems to allow the implant of a human embryo in a human, other than a human primate uterus. I don't think a human embryo should be implanted in any non-human uterus, even if it's a non-human primate uterus. I just asked the minister to look at that. Just those two.
For the Parliamentary Channel, I'm Carla Palmer.
Of this month, I wish to welcome the listening audience from Radio 1540, the National Voice, and Radio 810 in Grand Bahama, as well as 104.5. Livestream.com/ZNS Bahamas is where you can also get us. Also on Facebook. And our website, ZNSBahamas.com. Now, as we wait for members to begin this morning's session, again, they are supposed to be debating the bill for stem cell research and therapy, also looking at taking out of committee and passing the National Training Agency bill as well as the Homeowners Protection Bill. While we wait for them to get started this morning, let's listen to Cyan Thompson. She has a short recap of the afternoon session.
Nation, where Bahamians are free and charted their own destinies. The member for Angliston also responded to the opposition's negative remarks in the House before addressing the bill on stem cell research.
Mr. Speaker, I rebuke, as a proud Bahamian woman and mother and citizen, any negative psychic message which surreptitiously or even sometimes cleverly are implanted in our psyche as a people. I especially rebuke, Mr. Speaker, this retarding energy when it is within earshot of our young people. Very dangerous. Our up-and-coming, young and refreshed generation of Bahamians, filled with hope and optimism and talent and ability, Speaker, we must not speak of failure and doom upon our people. Speaker, I heard even a senior prelate, one of the denominations, speak of our people drowning. Speaker, we're not a drowning people, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, our country does face complex challenges and worrying changes. But we cannot throw our hands up into the air and cry and moan and groan and gnash our teeth and hold our heads. Speaker, I want to give a news flash to this Parliament for those who might not know. For us in leadership, in particular in this country, in the church and in this Parliament and elsewhere, this defeatist behavior, this spirit of, and I don't know if this is a word, overwhelmedness, is the easiest thing in the world to do. Yeah. When you face crisis, you could crumble any second. It's easy, Speaker. But what is difficult and what is also required of us as men and women who have trusteeship of our nation on behalf of generations coming up and those yet unborn is that we roll up our sleeves and that we put our shoulders to the wheel, that we be of good courage and stand for our people. Speaker, the member for West Grand Bahama in Bimini, several weeks ago, referred to the book of Joshua. And I looked at this now with the assistance of the member for Yamakroa, who's a minister in the church and who was able to access this for me. The book of Joshua admonishes us to be strong and courageous. And it further advises, do not be afraid or discouraged, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Speaker, the book of Joshua further admonishes that after 40 years in the wilderness, and we know we have 40 years as a new nation, that God's people should go out and possess all the land. Not some. If you read the Bible, it talks about the rivers, the mountains, not the safe quarters or the familiar turf, but those areas yet uncharted and far into the distance and vast and extensive and sometimes difficult. Take possession of the land the Lord thy God has given you. That is what we are required to do as a people. We cannot stay in a box and say, oh, we can't enforce the traffic laws, so we can't do too much. We have to view ourselves in a very different way, Mr. Speaker. And the Bible tells you that. Go and possess the land, the extent of the land, the uncharted portions of the land, the difficult terrain of the land. Go and possess it, Mr. Speaker. Speaker, today the coat of arms is displayed in Parliament. And the member for Carmichael, who created the coat of arms? The Junkanoo Development Association, all of the major groups have collaborated, and they've created the coat of arms, which is displayed outside in Parliament, in the Parliament Square. And Mr. Speaker, as has been pointed out, it stands in front of Queen Victoria, the statue. And it challenges that statue in height and width. And Mr. Speaker, this is a symbolic, visionary thing out there, because it's fundamental in its symbolism. The statue of the 19th century British monarch and the symbol of our coat of arms, which represents our new and emerging national identity, Speaker. Speaker, in a speech commemorating our national independence, the late Lyndon Oscar Pindling described us as having what he called a beautiful history. And you wonder about that description because when you look at the pain and the denigration and the suffering that we suffered as a people, but his vision looked at the upholding of courage, the unshakable vision, the spiritual anchor, the powerful love of God and country and fellow man. Plenty love that brought us through the fire, Mr. Speaker. We have a beautiful history. And yes, Mr. Speaker, we are not ugly. We are not weak. We are not inept. We are a powerful people with an incredible track record to date. We are a beautiful and gifted people with a beautiful country. Mr. Speaker, I am proud to be a Bahamian, and I'm proud to represent the people of Angliston. And Mr. Speaker, today the people of Angliston have challenges. Those challenges in that community relate to issues of employment, housing, conditions of poverty, problems of crime and violence. And the policy of our government must respond to these challenges, Mr. Speaker. And the Engliston Urban Renewal Program is at work in Engliston. It's been there for a year. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to say that we are going to rework and revitalize that program. I'm very pleased the member for Cat Island, Rumkey, and San Salvador has announced that there will be $10 million for housing repairs, and Engliston will get its share of that. I am seeing a renewal in Engliston in terms of assisting people with roof repairs and housing improvements out of these funds. I'm looking forward to environmental regeneration in that community, to new youth programs, to community engendering initiatives, Speaker. And so, in the face of our challenges, Speaker, we have to stand to the task. We cannot shrink and rub our hands and cry in the corner, Speaker. We must rise to the occasion. It's tough. Tough. It's tough. But you can't, in the face of the toughness, Mr. Speaker, we got to pull our people through with a shining objective. Speaker, the member for Kalani said, we are not good at enforcing. So in other words, he said, I'm saying this is what he probably meant. We can't enforce, not even traffic laws. So I think he's saying we shouldn't try and jump in this big league. But Mr. Speaker, but in requiring high standards, if we say we need high standards, that should not be an argument to disqualify behavior. Should not be an argument. Should not. Speaker. And we should not be arguing that the limits of our nation should be limited because we can't enforce the traffic laws. I'm very disappointed by that kind of comment, Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, I support this legislation. I support it because it creates a legal framework. It protects, through its provisions, the monitoring of this activity and ethical standards. It will create new opportunity for young Bahamian scientists, and there are many, and I know them. And this will allow us to begin to build capacity as a new and developing nation in this field. And we're going to build capacity in other areas too, Mr. Speaker. We don't have to stay with the same script that we inherited 30 years ago. And we shouldn't be afraid to push the envelope and to create new horizons for our people, Mr. Speaker. And so for those who have trepidation about us moving forward in an adventurous way, Mr. Speaker, I want to urge them, fear not, because it is in the book of Joshua that we have been admonished to possess the land, not to stay in a little 2x4 in the corner, Speaker, but to go out and possess the entirety of the land. And I am hoping that at this 40th anniversary, as we begin a new era in our lives as a people, that we will begin to see ourselves in a much more progressive way, without limitation, as the people who are gifted and talented and who are able to do incredible things, Speaker, that the world will watch and see. So, Mr. Speaker, having said that, I support this legislation. Thank you.
During his contribution to legislation on stem cell research, Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture and member for Carmichael, the Honourable Dr. Daniel Johnson, also focused on independence and explained some of the symbols on the coat of arms created by Dr. Herver Svein.
From his words, that these spirits, one of the flamingo, which most Bahamians, a lot of people have never seen up close and personal, really was done not because of its beautiful color, radiant wings, elegant stance, but actually it was done because of the manner in which the flamingos take care of their families, nurture and protect each other. The way the male sits on the nest, one of the only birds in the world, the male sits on the nest to guard the young so that the female can go out, stretch her wings, get a rest, and socialize a while, and come back rested. It says that these birds actually are in it for the long term. Flamingos seem to have a developmental capacity. They're not in it for the short term. Flamingos stay for the long haul. And that was why he looked at this particular bird He said the blue marlin, which is an even more mysterious fish. I don't think very many people could say they've landed one or boated one or even come close to catching one. But if you ever encounter one on a line, you will think you caught yourself a Mack truck. These fish spend 99% of their life very deep water, out in the Atlantic Ocean, by themselves, minding their business, minding their business. Sometimes they come up to feed for brief moments. And that's when most people try to catch them. But if you catch one, you'll find out they have a fight like nobody else could imagine. And most times, they actually get away. It's very difficult to capture, almost impossible to beat. And he thought that was something that he saw in the Bahamian spirit and put that one of the symbols that will endure the test of time. And furthermore, he thought, how would he come up with this motto that would last? Reverend Dr. Bain pondered this particular piece for the longest time he could imagine. The only way he thought we would grow as a country, following the dictates of Almighty God, he would also want to remember he is a great artist, but he's also a Baptist preacher. And he came up with the dictates he thought for us to grow. We would only move forward if we looked upward as to where our strength comes from. If we looked ahead, something where we would get to go, we went at it together. He came up with his motto actually from his meditations. It took 2 years. So today we congratulate the Reverend Dr. Purvis Bain on his great accomplishment. He outside in Parliament Square, emblem of his vision, his fidelity to us as a nation. Stem cell research, my colleagues, has the ability to eradicate certain illnesses forever. People around here who have diabetes, people around here who have chronic glaucoma, people around here who have heart disease, coronary failure, and congestive heart failure, any number of things, kidney failure. Arnold Forbes was there with a man with kidney cancer, thanks to God and his wife.
Mount Moriah.
Mount Moriah. Hear me? This can do that. This is a game changer.
For the Parliamentary Channel, I'm Cyan Thompson.
With Cyan Thompson from the last time members met on the 3rd of this month. Again, members preparing to conclude that debate on stem cell research and therapy today, and hopefully get to the Homeowners Protection Bill as well as that National Training Agency bill that was debated and sent to committee. Again, we want to welcome the listening audience from Radio 1540, the National Voice, as well as Radio 810 in Grand Bahama, and 104.5, livestream.com/ZNS Bahamas. You can visit us at our website, znsbahamas.com, and we also on Facebook. Again, members preparing to debate stem cell research and therapy. The government pushing this legislation, and of course the opposition, at least the leader of the opposition, saying, hold on, we need to take our time and get the not only legislation, but get the personnel in place to be able to police and monitor what's going on. Let's join them now as they prepare to begin this morning's debate.
By the hand of the angel who appeared to him in the bush, he brought them out after he had shown wonders and signs in the land of Egypt, and in the Red Sea, and in the wilderness 40 years. Two personalities went swimming. One was for horses, one was for sheep. Every time the water, when the swimming was over, horses ran out first, put on suit clothes instead of lace. So by the time she realized what was happening, the only clothes left was quarters. But rather than put on clothes of clothes, suits walk naked. And hence the expression in which that was the naked suit. Because that there will be the one naked suit. So let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we thank you for the opportunity to be part of what you're doing in this context. We thank you for those who made the sacrifice to represent your people. And we ask, O Lord, for your grace and mercy. Be with our speaker, be with our prime minister, be with our opposition, our Dr. General, all those who are in authority, be with your ministers and parliamentary secretaries. All the people carry on the business with us. O Lord, in thy human mercy, comfort those who mourn. Help of thy Spirit, the Holy Spirit of comfort, will be able to soothe their wounded spirit. Bless our children and grandchildren, students in their summer program, those involved in other worthwhile activities, the betterment of themselves and this nation. Forgive us our sins, O Lord, and give us grace and strength sufficient for this day. We ask in the precious name of Jesus who taught us when we pray to pray. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name, thy kingdom come. Thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Good morning, honorable members. Today is the 17th day of July in the year of our Lord 2013. And I wish to welcome each and every one of you, distinguished members, to our sitting today. When we recessed at our last sitting, we were debating second reading and committal, a bill for an act to provide for the conduct and regulation of stem cell research and therapy in the Bahamas and for connected matters, connected purposes. Before we continue with our debate, I'd just like to make a brief intervention. The House of Assembly and its staff is saddened by the loss, and we extend heartfelt condolences to my personal assistant, which was Angela McKenzie, on the loss of their husband, Mr. Kevin McKenzie. We in the House and throughout our country memorialize his death and his passing with the assurance that God knows best and he will never allow their family to hurt beyond what they can bear. We ask that you keep her in your prayers, and may he rest in eternal peace. Members are reminded to support the Youth Against Violence and the Nelson Cooper Celebrity Basketball Tournament scheduled for this Saturday at 7:30. I understand some of the captain of our team, the member for Pinewood, is traveling and may miss the event. I urge the member gave a wave, some indication that the speaker knows not what he says. The speaker will accept. Nonetheless, we look forward to a good turnout and great fun in the event when we, for the first time in history, beat the pastors. The House should applaud that. This is the only time we could beat the pastors and get away with it. I think the Lord will be pleased. That being said, honorable members, let us begin our proceedings today. And again, I wanted to wish you and your families and this country a wonderful independent month of July. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for North Eleuthera.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I rise on behalf of the people of North Eleuthera to make a contribution on the bill currently before us today in the House to introduce a bill for stem cell research and therapy in the Bahamas. Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I'd like to take a few minutes to thank the Independence Committees in North Eleuthera. Mr. Speaker, since our last sitting, this great Commonwealth celebrated our 40th anniversary of independence. There were celebrations throughout North Eleuthera. They were well organized and attended. There were church services, cultural shows, honoring of outstanding citizens, sports for kids. I recall in Spanish Wells they had the slippery pole. That was a race, competition they had. It was a lot of fun. There were motorcades, the flag raising ceremonies. Yes, there were fireworks across the island. There was junkanoo and reflections. We had a great time. In fact, I personally made it to 11 of those functions. The point is, Mr. Speaker, these functions and the events did not happen on their own. I thank the committee personally, and I thank the volunteers that have made all those events. I think in North Eleuthera we had some 16 of them across the constituency who made those events a successful independence celebration for our 40th anniversary. Mr. Speaker, now to the bill at hand to introduce the introduction of stem cell research and therapy in the Bahamas. I will say firsthand that I am not fully aware of all the information and advancements or challenges that researchers are encountering with stem cell research. Mr. Speaker, for the most part, there's excitement and hope around medical research and advancement. While as a student studying biology, I recall the excitement around a few advancements in the medical research world at the time. I recall in 1997, and many of you will likely recall as well, there was Dolly the sheep that was cloned. Scientists in Scotland had announced the birth of the world's first successful cloned mammal, Dolly the sheep. Dolly was created at the Roslin Institute in Edinburgh. She was actually born on the 5th of July, 1996, but not publicly announced until 1997. Thus, a good indication to us and all persons that work is carried out oftentimes behind the scenes and not announced until later. Dolly was the first mammal to have been successfully cloned from an adult cell. Up until that point, cloning had only been carried out from embryo cells. Dolly was cloned by inserting DNA from a single sheep cell into an egg and implanted into a surrogate mother. Dolly became an exact genetic duplicate of the animal from which the single cell was taken. While there was much excitement around Dolly, Mr. Speaker, you will recall Dolly itself and the cloning of Dolly sparked much ethical controversies. I believe, from what I recall, she lived to be about 5 or 6 years old. In 2000, also during my college years, there was the Human Genome Project, HGP. This first available rough draft of the genome was completed by a group at the University of California in Santa Cruz. Mr. Speaker, these, as with most advancements, were the focus of many of my class conversations, especially in genetics, microbiology, and a class called comparative embryology. However, with all the excitement as undergrads, we also realized the controversies. We realized the ethical concerns and the fear that the lack of proper regulations and enforcement and ad hoc researchers allowed to do as they please with little monitoring certainly presented themselves as great concerns. These were concerns that I had as an undergrad student studying biology, These are still the concerns I have today. Mr. Speaker, if we're honest with ourselves, we note that, as with most small countries, there are issues with enforcing laws. We might have regulations, but oftentimes there's issues with enforcing laws. For example, just last night I noticed a clip on the internet from a YouTube clip of Nygaard Key. And it was gaming, a clip with gaming on the key itself. If we cannot enforce the laws as it relates to gaming on Nygaard Key, how can it be that we'll enforce the laws and regulations as it relates to stem cell research? Mr. Speaker, this remains.
Member rises on the point of order. The chair recognizes honourable member for Golden Gates.
Mr. Speaker, I don't know whether it's intentional or unintentional, but there's no such thing as gaming at Nygaard Key. I have visited Nygaard Key open repeatedly, and you play poker with just chips. It's not no money. Just exchange of chips. And there's no money. No exchange of money. No, absolutely no exchange of money. And you have friendly games all the time. That's not illegal gaming.
Order. Members.
And so, Mr. Speaker, that's why I said I don't know whether it's intentional.
Members.
I'm trying to give the member the benefit of the doubt. I don't know whether it's intentional or unintentional. But based on what he said, he's giving the impression that there is gambling happening at Nygaard Key. But that's absolutely not the case.
Very well. Thank you, Honourable Member for North Luttrell. The member yields. The chair recognizes the member for Kalani. Members?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Members?
Mr. Speaker, the member admitted himself that is gaming. In casinos, you don't use money, you use chips.
Come on.
Members? The member for Golden Gates has the floor.
Illegal gaming. Mr. Speaker, I have never played poker in my life. I don't know how to play poker, right? But I know when you gamble, you must have exchange of money. If you're having, it's like when you play Monopoly and you use pretend to be money. You can't call that gambling. That's not gambling. And if they have these chips and there's no exchange of money, then they just exchange of chips with absolutely no value. Why would you give the impression that there's gambling happening at Nygaard Key when you know that's not the case? And then what makes matters worse, Mr. Speaker, is for the leader of the opposition to get up and to try and justify what's being said by his member for North Luttrell.
Foolishness.
That is absolutely ridiculous.
Very intelligent people.
The member for Kalani, let's move this debate on. Let's keep the level of the debate. It's very civil. The member for North Luttrell, you may rise.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Just be aware that you are advised to not convey the wrong impression as an honourable member of this place. And so just keep that in mind. Member for North Luttrell.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, this remains most of the debate today around the world, especially as it relates to ethical concerns, enforcement, and regulation. While we have seen some developed countries around the world approve some levels of stem cell research and therapy, and yes, there's some that support it. However, this debate has been ongoing for many years in such countries. And there are governments that have given approval from some pressures. The Minister of Health, for example, in Italy, Mr. Renato Balzari, noted that he approved stem cell research because of the pressure from a high level of patients in Italy. Certainly in the Bahamas, there's not a high number of patients that we do have here, not presently. I wonder, who are we getting pressure from? Are we getting pressure from someone?
Member rises on a point of order. The chair recognizes honourable member for Pine Ridge.
Because the member of North Luttrell is misleading this House. For him to stand to his feet and say there is not a high number of Bahamian patients who are seeking stem cell therapy outside of the country is untrue. Many people throughout the country here have been seeking stem cell therapies for many aspects of chronic non-communicable diseases like diabetes, lupus, certain types of cancers, erectile dysfunction, and the list goes on and on. I could list you names and numbers of people in my practice who have sought stem cell therapies outside of this country because the therapies were not available. That statement is completely untrue, and the Bahamian population is waiting for this bill to be passed, where many people will be able to have access to stem cell therapies here in the Bahamas.
Very well. Thank you, honourable member. Member for Kalani.
compare the numbers he's talking about.
Member for Kalani. Member for Kalani. Member for Kalani. Member for Kalani, take your seat. Member for Kalani, take your seat. Member for Pine Ridge, it's fine. Take your seat. Member for North Eleuthera, we'll continue your presentation.
Thank you, Mr.
And again, I urge you to continue. The member for Pine Ridge indicates that there's a great demand for it. And so,
Mr. Speaker, what I've said, and I would just say it again, and I'd be careful how I say this. I've said compared to the numbers in Italy, I can't imagine the Bahamas to have the same numbers. Now, that's really what I said. Moreover, Mr. Leader, as noted by the Leader of the Opposition, we have yet to achieve ideal health care services for our citizens. Now, hopefully all of us can agree on that. We still have to grow. We still have room to go. In addition, we have yet to see the National Health Insurance Act as promised during the first year in office by the current government. Mr. Speaker, they are now in their second year of office and still no national health insurance. Further, Mr. Speaker, we are now only in recent years building mini hospitals in the Family Islands. North Eleuthera, for example, is also in need of a mini hospital. We are most certainly, there's needs around our country and in North Eleuthera for upgrades to our clinics. Some still need backup generators. There's still needs for disability ramps. Mr. Speaker, some of our clinics don't even have signs. For example, in Spanish Wells, they still need a sign to say Spanish Wells Clinic. I'm sure that's the case around the country, perhaps. These buildings need to be painted. They have to be, there's need for repairs to the windows, to the ACs, to the doors, to the ceiling. That's to show that we still have room. We still need to grow as a country. There's still improvements that need to be made. There's a lack of doctors in Family Islands. Yet we rush and push through a bill, and it makes me wonder, why are we pushing it through? Are we trying to make some people or certain people happy? Mr. Speaker, the bottom line is we still have much work to do to ensure that all citizens can obtain proper health care. And yes, as with most small countries around the world, we have our challenges. As a result, with so many vital areas yet to achieve to provide ideal health care and proper facilities, I personally don't see why we're rushing through with such a bill through Parliament at this time. In addition, I am not sure we are prepared to meet the international standards to enforce the laws and necessary monitoring, conduct stem cell research in the Bahamas. For example, in the United States, they have the Federal Drug Administration, FDA. And in Canada, when they prepared to pass such similar legislation in 2002, they set up a similar agency to approve, oversee, enforce, and regulate stem cell research in centers. Mr. Speaker, without such expert agencies, we could be putting our country and its future in danger. Many scientists and researchers warn of the dangers of stem cell research in general, and even more so if not regulated, and if regulated, not enforced. Becky McClan, for example, Mr. Speaker, in her article entitled Dangers in Embryonic Stem Cell Research, Lack of Safety Oversight, and that's from www.workersmemorialday.org, is the website, indicates.
The member yields. The chair recognizes the member for North Eleuthera, for North Andros and the Berries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If you heard my presentation, I took time to explain that there was no need to be involved in embryonic stem cell anymore. The whole point of the international community in science, when awarding the Nobel Prize last year for medicine to the two scientists, one Japanese, one British, for stem cell research, was because they found a way to do the same thing that with the adult stem cell. More importantly, from the patient's own adult stem cell. So why are you bringing up embryonic stem cell, this man? You all don't read?
Very well.
You don't understand?
Thank you, honourable member. Member, you've been so advised. Member for North Eleuthera.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, it's when other members say you're not reading, the reality is, when I read, I try to recall what I've done.
Remember, just address the chair.
And I try to remember the things that I've done. So I'll just leave that there and let the public read that. Mr. Speaker, basically the research could lead to public health threats if left unchecked. The scientific ability to easily create a variety of new human infectious agents that are designed to cause specified human diseases through genetic engineering. If genetic engineering is carried out, if it is carried out, it might not be carried out at this stage, but if it is, it can cause infectious diseases that we have not seen as yet. The author further noted that in order to find a cure for particular diseases, a scientist must first make a stem cell sick or diseased, and that such methods are done for biomedical research, drug discovery, and biological defense purposes. In addition, these dangerous genetically engineered agents that can be both infectious to humans and animals pose a serious public health threat by having the potential to contribute to new emergent diseases if released into the environment and not handled or contained properly.
Point of order. The chair recognizes the member for North Andros and the Berries.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Nowhere in our bill do we suggest anything about genetic engineering. We're talking about therapeutic uses of stem cells. That's a whole different subject that you are now talking about. That's not being entertained in this bill.
Thank you, member. Member for Kalani, you are not the presenter. Member for Kalani, the member for North Eleuthera can clarify himself. Member for Kalani, no, you out of order. You out of order. You out of order. Resume your seat. Member for North Eleuthera, continue your presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We, Mr. Speaker, are debating stem cell therapy and research. And this is also medical, this bill relates to medical issues. McLean also went on to speak about occasions where infectious genetically engineered viruses were being developed without appropriate risk assessments, used by untrained personnel, and were not properly screened. Mr. Speaker, the caution is that the release of these artificial genetic elements into the environment basically accelerates the speed of evolution and thereby enhances the possibility and probability of new emergent diseases. I'm speaking generally as it relates to the bill and as it relates to the medical field.
Big deal.
We are debating this bill. This is the first step, the research to the stem cell research and therapy, and I'm speaking generally as other countries have encountered it. Such circumstances might never happen, but these are the dangers that one must consider before proceeding. Thus, it's important to have the proper regulations and make sure that they're enforced. Mr. Speaker, in addition, there are many reports of even cosmetic surgeries that are involving stem cells that have gone wrong. These are the realities. For example, Dr. Paul Hoffler, a cell biologist at the University of California, warns that many of us are super excited about stem cells. This is a direct quote. At the same time, we have to be really careful. End of quote. Another direct quote from him. These aren't your typical drugs. You can't stop taking a pill and the chemical goes away. You can stop taking a pill and the chemical goes away, but if you get stem cells, most likely you will have some of those cells and their effects for the rest of your life. And we simply don't know everything that they're going to do. End of quote. As I said, I'm not an expert in this area, but I'm just quoting what doctors and experts in the area have said. On the other hand, Bing Zhang, a neurologist at the Henry Ford Hospital, in an article entitled Promise and Caution, shown in ongoing research into stem cell treatment of strokes. And that article was found at www.medicalexpress.com news. Notes that while stem cell therapy offers great promises for the treatment of strokes, much research remains to be done to show its long-term effectiveness and to understand the potential of the dangerous side effects. End of quote. Yet we in the Bahamas are excited and rushing through this bill. Mr. Speaker, we have to think these things. We have to think as a small country, what is it that these researchers and scientists, financial backers, whoever they want, what is it that they might want to do in our country that perhaps they can't do other countries, or not allowed to do in other countries? These are the things, as honorable members and parliamentarians, we must consider.
Absolutely.
As a member rise on a point of order, member for Pine Ridge.
I didn't want to stop him until he finished with his quotes.
The member.
He is absolutely misleading this House, and he's speaking out of context, and he's speaking in reference to embryonic cell therapy in the involvement of stroke patients. This bill has nothing to do with embryonic cell therapy.
No.
It has to do with adipose stem therapy, and which is harvesting the stem cells, the adult stem cells, from the individual itself, not embryonic cell lines or cord blood. He is making reference to studies involving embryonic cells. This bill has nothing to do with embryonic stem cell therapy.
Thank you, honourable member.
Thank you.
Member for Northern Luttrell.
Mr. Speaker, as I said, I'm debating and speaking on the bill, as well as the medical field at broad. The reality is these are some steps that we're making, and if we're not careful, if we don't have the regular regulations and enforcements, we can be misled as a country as well. Mr. Speaker, there are also many substantial reports of tumors occurring in the brain and spinal cords that were caused by stem cell treatment. In addition, Brian Cohen, in his article entitled "What are the Dangers of Stem Cell and Bone Marrow Transplant?" indicated that doing bone marrow transplant is a good indication, and it happened very often, that brain and spinal cord tumors occur during the transplant. Very often. And also they noted that graft versus host disease, that oftentimes that this can occur if the host actually can reject the transplant itself. And this is according to the National Cancer Institute. Mr. Speaker, I read in the news recently.
Another point of order. The chair recognized the member for Michael.
You know, just for public consumption, nothing to do, just so we don't frighten people into unnecessarily. The whole issue,
of course,
as to where you're trying to move.
In the form of a point of order, member.
In the form of a point of order, sir. for misleading the House in the most dramatic of ways, mind you. What the member is speaking to is what this bill seeks to address. The bill is to put regulations in place so you can attain the highest levels of safety, right, and ethics. That's what it's for. Furthermore, the groundbreaking research that people are now moving towards takes away the idea of rejection from any host of other complications from other people. Why? Because you're using your own tissue. It's that simple. So, you know, sometimes you spin down, you go, you get a little bit of blood, you suck off some blood. You can get all sorts of stuff back from your blood. They can store the blood and give it back to you a month later, a year later, whenever you want it. It's your own tissue. That's as simple as we can say. So what he is speaking of in the avant-garde way that where this research is going, it's your own cells that you will use for your own body's work, to heal the body. And this is the way God made the human body, right? The body is a perfect organism. And over time, some cells come and some go. It's a rhythm to life. And all stem cells do, it replenishes new cells. That's it. But they're speaking of your own tissue.
Very well. Thank you, honourable member. Member for North Luttrell.
Thank you once again, Mr. Speaker. What I'm saying is that, sure, that's what's in this bill. I'm speaking at health in general and medical in general. And if we're not sure, if we're not careful,
members, we're hearing too much extraneous noise.
If we're not careful,
chair wants to hear the member for North Luttrell.
If we don't do the regulations and enforce what we have, once we provide the regulations, if they're not enforced, then these extremes can happen. I said it might not happen. The reality is it might never happen. But we have to prepare and realize that whatever stage we're passing today, or we're trying to pass in the House and debating, if they're not regulated, if the regulations are not enforced, things happen behind the scenes, behind closed doors. Thus, every piece of legislation is exactly right. Thus, it's important, if we're going to pass things in this honorable House, to be aware of it. And so, therefore, we must be aware of the pros and cons. Mr. Speaker, I recently seen that there's many people that support stem cell research, and recently there was a gentleman, I think his name is Nygaard, who said he's come to bless, or something, coming to bless people. And if whoever he's come to bless, and however he's blessed them, or how well he's blessed them, or whoever they are, we cannot fall into a trap. Whatever we pass, whatever we do, must be to benefit the Bahamian people at large and all the Bahamian people. And so therefore we have to be careful how we proceed with bills in the House. Mr. Speaker, I end where I started. The bill before us today, yes, has pros and cons, as with most bills that we debate in this House, perhaps that we will always debate in the House. Therefore, we must consider all of them. We're here to represent the Bahamian people. We have to consider the extremes. We have to consider if we don't regulate, if we don't enforce, things can happen. Research does offer hope. It does offer cures, particularly for that of Parkinson's, Alzheimer's, cancer, spinal cord injuries, diabetes, and many others. And we have persons, I have persons in my family. There's a member that has Parkinson's. So the reality is it does offer hope. It does offer cures for these. But if we're not careful, if we don't have the regulations, we will have the regulations, but if they're not enforced, if the regulations are not enforced, then we face many dangers that occurred around the world. Mr. Speaker, there are many benefits from this as well. It includes limbs and organs can be grown in a lab from stem cells and used to transplant and help treat illnesses. It can help scientists to learn about human growth and cell development as well. Scientists and doctors will be able to test millions in potential drugs and medicines without the use of animals or human testers. Such a factor could tell if the drug is useful and if it has problems as well. So as I stated, Mr. Speaker, yes, there are pros and there are cons. But we have to be careful of what we're doing here in the House. Mr. Speaker, yet the underlying concern and the elephant in the room is if there's a lack of regulations, if it's not carried out, and there's also the ethical concerns. If these regulations are not enforced, what might be happening behind the scenes? As I said, they could create emerging diseases as well. Scientists can do that behind the scenes if they're not regulated, if the regulations are not enforced. And so the reality is, yes, these things might be happening now without us knowing. That's very true. I'm not ignorant of the fact, but the reality is these things we have to be careful of. And if we're debating these bills, if we're debating any bill in this House, we have to consider the regulations. We have to consider and make sure that the regulations are enforced. And after all, we have to make sure that all the bills before us help and benefit Bahamians at large and not any special interests. And so, Mr. Speaker, I thank you on behalf of the people of North Eleuthera.
Thank you. Thank you, Honourable Member. As many. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Marathon.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise this morning on behalf of the good and gracious people of Marathon. Again, thank them for sending me to this honorable place. Mr. Speaker, I also rise in support of the Stem Cell Research and Therapy Bill 2013. And before I get into discussion of the bill, there are a couple of items I think that have really captured the headlines over the last couple of days, which I want to speak about and lead into the bill. The first is, Mr. Speaker, the 40th anniversary and the celebration of our 40 years of independence, which took place last week at the fort. And it was an outpouring, Mr. Speaker, of thousands and thousands and thousands of Bahamians. I want to congratulate the minister who had responsibility for it, the Honorable Dr. Daniel Johnson.
Member for Carmichael.
The member for Carmichael. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As well as Mr. Jack Thompson and Dr. Tracy Thompson, who were the co-chairs of the committee, along with Mr. Charles Carter, and all those who played a significant role in the organizing of the events leading up to, including the celebrations that evening. Mr. Speaker, I was 7 years old on July 10th, 1973. But I could still remember very vividly the pride that I felt that evening when the Union Jack was lowered and the Bahamian flag went up. I remember the scores of people out there at the park. And although I couldn't relate to the significance of it entirely, what I felt last week, Mr. Speaker, when the Bahamian flag was rose and we began to sing, unlike many Bahamians, you felt the goosebumps and the sense of pride and accomplishment as a people, as a united people, as a blessed people, Mr. Speaker. And so I just want to say that I am proud to be a Bahamian. I'm very proud of what we have accomplished as a small nation, and that we have to continue to work together as a people to ensure that we become the best little country in the world. Mr. Speaker, on Saturday past, I also had the pleasure to go and travel to New York, where I represented the Bahamas government in a church service and reception in New York for independence celebrations, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, I have to say that Bahamians are making an impact all over the world. All over the world. I was most impressed by the number of Bahamians or persons of Bahamian descent who live in New York and in that area who came in for the church service. Some even came in from Philadelphia. The church was absolutely packed, jam-packed. And this was the Church of the Holy Family, which is right down the road from the UN across the street. And also traveling with us to bring the message was the very Reverend Monsignor Preston Moss, from the pastor from Anthem Church in Fox Hill. And he delivered a very moving sermon, Mr. Speaker, reminding us where we came from and that we have to continue on our journey moving forward. But, Mr. Speaker, it really reminded me as I participated in all of the independence celebrations going to New York, and other ministers will be traveling to other countries where we have embassies, Mr. Speaker. Some have last week, some this week, where we'll be having similar ceremonies, just connecting with our people throughout the world and sharing independence. But it really reminded me, Mr. Speaker, that this theme, the bridge to the future, the journey continues, really is apt for where we are and where we're going. And we have come a long way in 40 years, but we still have a long way to go. There's a quote in the booklet from the program in New York where Forrester Carroll, who is the Consular General there, now newly appointed, gave a message, wrote a message, but I just want to read the part that he talks about the bridge to the future. And I quote, "The theme chosen for this historical milestone, Bridge to the Future, the Journey Continues, is most appropriate as the freedom fighters who have not passed on during those first 40 years will no doubt lay down their swords to study war no more during the next 40 years. As they have passed the baton on to the inheritors of the struggle, they built the bridge with much blood, sweat, and tears, and now this new generation of independent Bahamians must take up the mantle and pledge to improve the lot in the ensuing years for the next generation of new Bahamians, Mr. Speaker. Close quote. That's important, Mr. Speaker, because I'm going to come back to the part about the new generation, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as a country, we have produced 3 Rhodes Scholars. Per capita, I think that's more than any other country in the world. Some say that makes us the smartest country in the world, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we have produced numerous gold medals in the Olympics, track, field, and also in sailing. We have produced gold medals in the 4x100 with our women, and we produced a gold medal in the 4x4 with our men. And Mr. Speaker, when you think of the significance of that, it's not that we have one outstanding athlete, but in order to be the best in the world in the relay, you have to have 4 outstanding athletes, in some cases 5 or 6 when you're going through the round. And when you think of a country of some 300,000+ people, Mr. Speaker, and that we are able to do that on the world stage, Mr. Speaker, the significance of it really begins to hit home. We have countries who are 20, 30, 40, even 100 times our size, who do not have one single gold medal at the Olympics, Mr. Speaker. Not a single gold medal in track and field, Mr. Speaker. And so when you look at that, Mr. Speaker, you begin to understand that we are really a special people, and there's something extremely special about being Bahamian. We are a blessed and gifted people, Mr. Speaker. We have come a long way, as I said, but we still have a long way to go. Mr. Speaker, the next important issue that happened this week was the opening of the National Training Agency, Mr. Speaker. And I want to congratulate again the Minister for Golden Gates, the Honorable Shane Gibson.
Member for Golden Gates.
Yeah, I said the member for Golden Gates, the Honorable Shane Gibson. Mr. Speaker, the reason why I mention the names, Mr. Speaker, is because, believe it or not, Mr. Speaker, people are watching, and when we call just the member from a constituency, a lot of persons do not relate who that member is, Mr. Speaker. And so I try to do both so the person will know exactly who it is we're speaking about. We assume, because we know who all the members are, that the general public does, Mr. Speaker, and so that's the reason why I mentioned both. But, Mr. Speaker, that is a critical initiative that has been undertaken by this administration and which is being headed by Agatha Marcel. She is doing an excellent job of getting it off the ground, and I want to encourage all of the stakeholders in the country, politicians, business persons, community persons, to be involved and supportive of this initiative. With regard to education, we will continue to do our part to ensure that we prepare our young people so that when they leave school, if they choose a career path which we identify in school, they will be able to move on to the opportunities which this training agency will be able to provide. And, Mr. Speaker, I want to make the point that we are really now catching up with the rest of the world in this area. A National Training Institute is established in most of the major Caribbean countries, and the accreditation of bodies which train is governed by those training agencies. And so we intend to do nothing different here. Mr. Speaker, the third issue which comes to the bill, really, is the issue that's been made in the press this week about Peter Nygaard, Speaker. Peter Nygaard. It's really a distraction, Mr. Speaker, because, quite frankly, I still don't understand what all of the hullabaloo is about, to be honest with you. But here's what I know about Mr. Peter Nygaard. Not what people say about him, what I know about him. I know that he has been a permanent resident of this country from 1984, 30 years. I know he's been coming to this country for over 40 years, almost as long as I've been a Bahamian and born myself. I know that he's contributed greatly in the millions to the development of sports, education, culture, and just helping the ordinary Bahamian. I know he says he's a friend of the Bahamas. He's a friend not only of the PLP, he's a friend of many on the other side as well. But more importantly, he's a friend of the Bahamas, Mr. Speaker. I have no idea, absolutely none, what he and Mr. Bacon are fighting over. And I don't intend to get in a fight between two billionaires because it has nothing to do with me, Mr. Speaker, to be honest with you. Yeah. So I'm not quite sure why other people are getting in a fight between two billionaires, Mr. Speaker. I know that he has expanded the land where he is by accretion over numerous years, many of that expansion happening over the 5 years previous to us coming into office, Mr. Speaker. I know he has no criminal record, nor has he been charged with any criminal offense. And I say that part, Mr. Speaker, because I know in the past in this country, as politicians and as business people, we have been associated with or had persons of foreign nationals into meetings or into functions where we have been present, not knowing what the background is of those persons, and have been photographed with them, and much has been made of it, Mr. Speaker. So I say that to say I don't know of anything with regard to that. I think of persons like Victor Corzani, Derek Ryan, and others, Mr. Speaker. Not Derek, Derek Turner, sorry, Derek Turner. Derek Turner and others, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I understand also that there's a video out that has, yeah, he has a business partner. No, I mean, I wasn't getting to that part. That's another point. I understand that there's a video out, Mr. Speaker, that has certain members of the cabinet, Mr. Speaker, me included, meeting with Mr. Nygaard. I think that was some time ago, I think about a year or more ago, but the date is inconsequential to me as well as the actual meeting itself. So I am not sure really what all the big hullabaloo is all about, to be honest with you, as I said. I don't know whether it's because there are two billionaires fighting, and that's of consequence. I don't know whether or not it's because those on the other side or those who support them want to make it a political issue for whatever reason, and only they know what that reason is. And I don't know whether or not there is genuine concern that some way, some form, in some manner, that 21 members of the cabinet of the Bahamas could agree to something which we think or thought was bad for the Bahamian people and be influenced by anyone in that regard, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as you have seen and we've demonstrated to the public, in the cabinet, in this cabinet, we have 4 doctors, Mr. Speaker. 4 doctors. Very established, well-known, well-recognized, smart, intelligent, young, older, in between, Mr. Speaker. When this issue of stem cell came before the cabinet, Mr. Speaker, the irony of it is, Mr. Speaker, is that this came before the cabinet based on approvals that happened under their administration.
Whose administration?
Under their administration, the FNM administration, through an approval which was given to a company in Grand Bahama. That's how this came to us, Mr. Speaker. That is how it came to us. And that company, through their approval, had already commenced to spend millions of dollars in Grand Bahama. Millions, Mr. Speaker. With no regulation in place, with no act in place, and the people were progressing, Mr. Speaker. That was our concern. That is when it came to us. The leader, Mr. Speaker, of the opposition, the member for Kalani, was in that former government. He knows of what I speak, Mr. Speaker. He knows clearly of what I speak.
The member stands. The member for Kalani, you have the floor.
Mr. Speaker, I asked the member if he said this has been approved and everything. I asked the member to table the documentation of approval.
Member for Marathon.
Mr. Speaker.
Members.
Mr. Speaker.
Members.
Speaker.
Members. Members. If the Bahamian people are going to benefit from the debate, they need to be heard. Members. There has to be a time when there's silence in here. Thank you. Member for Marathon.
Thank you. Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure what the leader's point was. It wasn't a point of order because he wasn't disputing what I was saying. Normally when you stand up to make a point of order, you dispute what the person is saying and say that I am incorrect and ask me to prove it. I have no idea what he stood up for. None. He didn't deny it. He didn't say it didn't happen. He didn't say that they didn't approve it. Had he said that, I would understand him making the argument for me to produce something. I made my point. If he wants to deny it, I want him to stand up and deny it. So, Mr. Speaker, that is how it first came to us, Mr. Speaker. That's how it first came to us. Those are the facts, and that's the truth. It came because they approved something and didn't put the legislation regulations in place. And we wanted to ensure that the facility did not open up without these regulations and this act in place. So when the member for Northern Luther asked what the rush is, he should have asked his colleagues what the rush is. He shouldn't have been asking us. He should have been asking them. Ask them why they didn't do it and why they approved these people to do this thing without having the proper regulations and legislation in place, Mr. Speaker. And then they have the nerve, Mr. Speaker, to talk about us resigning, Mr. Speaker. Us resigning over foolishness, Mr. Speaker. Foolishness. To reckon their problem that they know about, Mr. Speaker. They got to be joking, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we were so concerned about this, Mr. Speaker. We established a committee, Mr. Speaker. We established a committee, Mr. Speaker, which included the Medical Association. That's right. And the Ethics Committee, which issued the license initially. Absolutely. Were the ones who issued the license initially. The Ethics Committee, to get their input on this legislation, Mr. Speaker, and the regulations. Mr. Speaker, their very own Dr. Sands, Mr. Speaker. Their very own Dr. Sands, Mr. Speaker, supported this legislation and regulation and the stem cell that is being proposed to be done in the country. And the member for Grand Bahama, the member for North Andros and the Berries, the member for Carmichael, have all already gotten up and spoken with regard to what this bill is all about. And those on the other side know it, you know. Don't mind them playing crazy. They know this. But instead of talking to the issues, they prefer to confuse the public, cause the public to panic over something that they approved. That they approved.
Without legislation.
This is something they approved, Mr. Speaker.
Without legislation. You're cleaning up the mess.
They approved it. Now let them get up and say they didn't approve it.
Members.
Mr. Speaker, this is all about so, Mr. Speaker, just because someone says they have an interest in stem cell in this country, just because Peter Nygaard says he has an interest in stem cell, do you think that's enough to get any one of the 21 of us, Mr. Speaker, us, to come forward and push a piece of legislation which we do not believe in? Mr. Speaker, all of us, more than 3/4 of this cabinet, Mr. Speaker, more than 3/4 of this cabinet took a salary cut to be in government. More than 3/4 of us. So you have to know we ain't here for the money, Mr. Speaker. You have to know that. We're not here for the money. Nobody could buy us, Mr. Speaker. Not a soul. Not a soul could buy us, Mr. Speaker. Our integrity means more to us than anything else, Mr. Speaker. I've said that here over and over and over again, Mr. Speaker. So whatever those on the other side are going about, the press and all the talk shows and all that, has nothing to do with our focus on doing what is in the best interest of the Bahamian people. We are focused, Mr. Speaker, focused on doing that, and nobody is going to influence us to do something that is against the interest of the Bahamian people. Thank you, sir. I don't care who they are, where they come from, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, we take our duties very seriously, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, you know, what gets me is that there's a certain way those on the other side play politics. It's very disturbing. Very disturbing. And you know why it's disturbing, Mr. Speaker? Because you have many young, talented, professional, hard-working, honest persons with integrity who want to come into this place, Mr. Speaker. But when they see the sort of dirt and nasty politics that's played by the other side, you have to question where there's weighted, Mr. Speaker. Why? Why would you want to do it, Mr. Speaker? They do things that they know are untrue, that have no relationship to what is going on or what we are doing on this side. I look at what they did to the honorable member for Golden Gates, Mr. Speaker. I mean, Mr. Speaker, for the whole of the last term, every time you spin around, the member going to jail. This, that, the next one, that, this one, over housing. And you know what's so disturbing about it, Mr. Speaker? That the report was done by the Auditor General with regard to the housing issues at the Ministry of Housing from 2008, Mr. Speaker. And they start on that report for 4 whole years, Mr. Speaker. And what did the report say?
Led by North Abaco.
What did the report say? The member for Golden Gates did absolutely nothing wrong. They did accuse him of one thing, Mr. Speaker. Being overly aggressive. That's all. He was guilty, Mr. Speaker, of being overly aggressive in building 1,400 homes in 5 years. That's what he was guilty of. And they sat on that report, Mr. Speaker, for 5 years, 4 years, and let the public go on with all kinds of things, and them. We only forced it out in the Senate when Dr. Dwayne Sands was going on about something he mentioned, and we made him table it. And I think that was in February or March of 2012. Had it not been for that, we'd had to wait until we came into office to see the report. For 4 years, Mr. Speaker.
They built 500 houses in 15 years.
So, Mr. Speaker, I see that, Mr. Speaker.
Oh, am I wrong? It's lower than that.
You know, Mr. Speaker.
515 years. That's three years.
So, Mr. Speaker, as I said, we guard our integrity very closely, Mr. Speaker. None of us on this side have exempted a relative from custom duties. None of us. None of us have had a contractor pay for a party for us, Mr. Speaker. None of us. None of us have given a contractor a company which we own or which we have shares in. None of us, Mr. Speaker. None of us have been on a ride in a helicopter, Mr. Speaker. None of us, Mr. Speaker. None of us have given a knighthood. None of us have given a knighthood to a non-Bahamian who's invested in this country, Mr. Speaker. None of us, Mr. Speaker. So, what do you think, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, none of us involved in anything like that, Mr. Speaker. Nor do we intend to do so, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, they can continue to play all the political games they wish, but we will not be distracted. We will not be taken off course, Mr. Speaker. We are on course to do big things in this country, Mr. Speaker, and with the help of Almighty God and the Bahamian people, we can do it, Mr. Speaker. We are going to... That's right. Not a word. Not a word. Mr. Speaker, we are going to fix this economy, which was ruined by that side, Mr. Speaker. We're going to fix it, and we're going to put the Bahamian people back to work, Mr. Speaker, and empower Bahamians while we do it. You know, Mr. Speaker, you know it's so funny, right? What I find, Mr. Speaker, so hilarious is that when we were in opposition, Mr. Speaker, and they had given a citizenship to, I think it was an individual in Life, I don't remember the name, Dingman, Mr. Dingman, for his own reasons, right? We objected to it. They said we were anti-foreign. They accused us of being anti-white, Mr. Speaker. Here it is now, Mr. Speaker, and to a great extent, Mr. Speaker, as a party, we accept that we have been so focused on our Bahamianization policy. We've been so focused on putting Bahamians first. And even though under our government led by Perry Gladstone Christie, the largest amount of foreign direct investment that ever come into this country is coming under the PLP, we as a party have not made an effort to connect with foreign investors. That's the truth. That is the truth. That's right. We have not done it. When you have contributions from Life Key, Mr. Speaker, we don't get any of that, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, the Right Honorable Prime Minister, and I say I'll get back to this new generation, the Right Honorable Prime Minister has made it a point for our new generation leaders that we must go out and make more contact with our investors and also those in the financial field, Mr. Speaker. We must do it, and we can't apologize for it, Mr. Speaker. So they accuse us of saying we're anti-foreign, Mr. Speaker. Now we go and we meet with foreign investors, Mr. Speaker. Now they say we undertake, Mr. Speaker. We can't win. The PLP can't win, Mr. Speaker, because we meet with a foreign investor. They have some influence with us for us to put our integrity on the line, Mr. Speaker. It's foolishness, Mr. Speaker. I know, yes, exactly. Mr. Speaker, they threw the gate more than us. They going through the gate, Mr. Speaker, more than us.
They got tickets to the gate.
Mr. Speaker, so from our standpoint, Mr. Speaker, we are making a concerted effort, Mr. Speaker, to meet those who are investing in our country and seeing what we can do to encourage them to do more and to listen to them to find out what we can do to assist them within the context of what we're doing, Mr. Speaker. And so, Mr. Speaker, as I close, I just want to say again that we are focused. We will continue to do what is right for the Bahamian people. We will not be distracted nor will we allow anyone to compromise us, Mr. Speaker. So I want to say that I fully support this bill, I endorse it, and I am happy, Mr. Speaker, that we are able to bring a framework of regulation and legislation to correct a vexing problem, which was started and caused by those on the other side, Mr. Speaker. It's them. So how they could get up in this place, outside this place, and talk foolishness is beyond me. But wonders never cease, Mr. Speaker. With that, I say thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for North, for South and Central Eleuthero.
This could be good. Pay attention, this could be good.
Mr. Speaker, good morning. That's myself. Let me first thank the people and constituents of Central and South Eleuthero who are always in my thoughts. And it is a great honor, the single greatest privilege of my life, to represent their interests. Mr. Speaker, as young as I may look, you look young? if I might say so myself. I've been in politics for a little while now as part of the team that the Honourable Member for Centerville had chosen to help him in his political quest. And quite early in that quest, we were confronted with an F&M administration which had so mismanaged its privatization efforts in the hospital that they invited people to come and do things at the hospital for which appropriate, proper regulation was absent. In the midst of this negligence on the part of that administration, people lost their lives. One part of that fiasco concerned a cancer treatment facility which made the press. I beg your indulgence, Mr. Speaker. This morning I took out some newspapers and was cited by the clerk, but I indicated to him I was merely signing in advance because I intend to tender these documents to which I'm going to refer. The Tribune carried the story, as painful as it must have been to its editorial group, but such was the scandal that it could not avoid being in the papers. On the 29th of April, 1998, the Tribune reported the beginning of the debate of the bill to reform healthcare services. And we participated, those of us who had the privilege of being either in this place or the other place, in that debate. Kalani, in fact, none of the other members were in this place or the other place at that time. No, sorry, Central Grand Bahamas. But we must be always careful to look at our history, and it might inform or better inform our responses to the issues which confront us in times like these when we are embarking upon legislation to put in place a regulatory framework for a new facility which might be controversial. So we say at this point, any controversy has been negated by the drafting of this legislation in conformity with recommendation made by a task force painstakingly appointed across party lines, across scientific disciplines, for the specific purpose of identifying those aspects of stem cell research which might be viewed as internationally and nationally controversial, and to avoid the pitfalls of such controversy. What I am surprised about is that there could be this divide within the ranks of the opposition on this subject, having regard to Dr. Dwayne Sand's participation in the process which has given rise to this legislation. It may well be that members opposite don't speak to one another outside this place. I find that surprising. I mean, I read with some delight that Long Island was confused by Killarney. Those are her words. And that is the leader and deputy leader in this place confusing one another. But it isn't funny anymore. It's serious business. When you read the document, the articles in the Tribune, probably the most opposite of them is the coverage of the Prime Minister at the time, Mr. Hubert Ingram, on the 27th of March, 1998. I will read from that. It says, government was fooled and, quote, betrayed the treatment center crisis and is fully prepared to have the matter litigated in court, Prime Minister Ingram told the House of Assembly. Yes. He made his remark shortly before an emergency measure was passed to allow for the suspension of dangerous health care facilities. Now, it was an emergency measure, Mr. Speaker, because at that time, the legislation such as it was on our books did not cover what oncology services was being permitted to do in the Bahamas with public patients. It says the measure was contained in a bill to amend the 84-year-old Health Services Act. That's how old and decrepit our legislation had become. And this is what he went on to say. I am personally offended, humiliated, and angry. And I assure the Bahamas that this episode is being fully examined and all those responsible will be brought to account. Significantly, what he did not say was, I give my undertaking that this will never, ever happen again. But we on this side, as we were in 1990, steadfastly holding to the interests of the Bahamian people, of the poor, the sick, those who could least afford to fend for themselves. In a sense, our political cajoling of the F&M brought about the suite of legislation in 1998 which formed the bedrock of the regulatory framework for healthcare services in this country. In fact, if you look in Volume 5 of the statute laws, you will see the Health Professions Act, which received its assent on the 6th of August, 1998. It was an act to provide for the establishment of a council for the regulation of health professions, the performance of services by members of those professions, and for purposes connected therewith. In addition, next to it is the Public Hospitals Authority Act, which received its assent on the 6th of August, 1998, an act to provide for the establishment of a body corporate to be known as the Public Hospitals Authority and for the functions relating to that authority, and to make provision in respect of matters connected therewith or ancillary thereto. And lastly, the Hospitals and Healthcare Facilities Act, which received its assent on the 25th of August, 1998, an act to provide for the licensing of hospitals and healthcare facilities and for matters incidental thereto. Now, Mr. Speaker, there was a reason why this suite of legislation was viewed as necessary in the political arena. I remember when Centerville took me to the hospital to view a gentleman who was in the public health ward, a victim of over-radiation, and you could knock on his chest, and it sounded like knocking on a door. That will go with me to my grave, because that is what we in this place are here to prevent. And we do so by passing laws which we bona fide believe to accomplish protecting the public good. When I first learned of a company called Okeanos, it was at a cabinet meeting, and the information which was given was that this company had had approval in principle to construct a facility for stem cell research and therapy. That permission was obtained between 2002 and 2007 of the Free National Movement, and of its ministers was a minister of health who happens to be the leader of the opposition. It is inconceivable that a health facility would have been given approval by the NEC or the cabinet without his input, his participation, and I dare say his consent. Pursuant to that permission, we were told that the company spent $5.5 million in constructing its facility and making it ready for the services it intended to be providing. We were on the horns of a dilemma, Mr. Speaker. To refuse granting the permission would expose the government to liability of at least $5.5 million. To grant the permit or approval willy-nilly would expose the general public to an unregulated entity performing services which were on the edge of being non-controversial. We in this party have had a history of calling for proper regulation of health services in our country, as is evident by the debate and controversy over oncology services and the suite of legislation passed as a result of the resolution of that controversy. The member for Centerville, the Right Honorable Prime Minister, quite appropriately told us that we would need to do further study on this subject before granting permission. Following that decision in Cabinet, a task force was appointed. Its composition was published in the newspaper. There were some very eminent people, persons who, up until we were last here, I thought enjoyed the respect, if not admiration, of the leader of the opposition, the member for Killarney. And they deliberated, made a report, which was again made public. And following that report, my ministry became involved in the drafting of the legislation undergirding the recommendation contained in the report. Consultation did not stop there. We met with the Christian Council, we met with the medical community, and the bill has been presented following the utmost careful consideration and public participation. Up until the last time we were here, there was no indication, not a single syllable, of warning that the opposition now might be divided on whether to support this legislation or not. Let me be very clear. I regard the approval that had been granted to this company in the absence of regulatory framework to be highly irresponsible, reckless. And indeed, it is surprising that an administration which ought to have been so embarrassed by the killing of innocent Bahamians, where new procedures were being embarked upon without any regulatory framework, could, in less than 10 years, forget the very lessons that ought to have been learned in that whole exercise. It's just appalling. And so, being responsible, we have crafted legislation, not out of the blue, Mr. Speaker. We looked at the legislation in the UK. We looked at the legislation in Germany. We looked at the legislation such as it is in the United States. And we looked at the legislation in Canada, which we ultimately adopted. Now, people come here and to insult us. When I say us, I'm not even talking about the government. For a person who aspires to hold the highest executive position in our country, to tell the Bahamian public that we are so incompetent as a people that we cannot even police our traffic laws, We are so incompetent as of him being leader of the opposition, if that is the group that he wishes to lead. Yeah. This must now transcend politics. The people who I happen to represent, I love and adore. I have the utmost respect for them. I trust them. And that trust enables me to believe that when we find wrongdoing, it is reported. And where it is reported, action is taken. Now, you may criticize the efficacy of that act. But which country in the world is perfect in its application of its laws? Name one. There's none. And to say that we don't believe traffic laws, you know how much money the government, particularly the F&M, made from having policemen stopping people who had not had their license paid up on time. In fact, every month there's evidence of the traffic police on patrol on particular streets, busy streets, checking to see whether you have paid to license your car. If you go to the magistrate's court in the evening, there are several magistrates who are busy doing traffic matters. This is evidence of a system that works. When you go to the magistrate's court during the day, it is a place which is busy. The laws of the Bahamas are being enforced. Now, do not assert so wildly that we just ignore the laws that we have on our books. That is just an irresponsible utterance. And it ought to be condemned by even members opposite. Because what they are saying is that when they presided, they did nothing. And it is based on that that we can say that we are all incompetent. Now, the member for North Eleuthera has said some things in this. All I can say is that when he was a supporter of mine in 2002, when he was on my election team in 2002, I'm saying, when he was on this side, he held a different view. He held a different view. No, you held a different, he held a different view.
Member, yes, continue to address the chair.
On the principle of regulation. We were not defeatists at any time. We have always supported the proper regulation of the medical health sector. We have always been advocates for it. We have voted for it. We still vote for it. And that is why we are bringing, quite responsibly, this bill to properly regulate stem cell research and therapy services in this country. Yeah. The bill is very clear. It sets a regulatory framework. It sets up a mechanism for that framework to be enforced. And the proof of the pudding will be in the eating. But at this stage, to throw up our hands in the air and to say, oh my God, we can't do this. Not now. But As one of my colleagues is fond of reminding me, this has been the mantra of the other side on every major of legislation in this country. The independence referendum, yes, but not now. National insurance, good idea, but not now. You know, this defeatist attitude has us now in a situation where you can't even use your cell phone during the day. But this is the philosophical difference of believing in Bahamians as opposed to having no belief at all in this group. We must believe in ourselves. We must believe that the Bahamian scientist who was on the task force is capable of forming scientific views in her discipline and giving advice which can be safely followed. I mean, the day that I stopped believing that Dr. Dwayne Sand is an excellent physician. He's my doctor. So the day that happened is a day that my confidence in myself is crushed. Yes. Because when I look at him, while he is not as handsome as I am, he's an extension of me.
Anything else up to say for that?
No, Dr. Sands. No, but we've got to reach the point where we accept that Bahamian professionals can hold their own at every single global level there is for them to hold their own in. And if I didn't believe that, I wouldn't have studied law. And there was a time when Anglican priests were white, all, without exception. They were English, that's true. But but that didn't stop my grandparents from believing that their sons and their daughters could study and that they could do the same thing that these white people from God came here to do. And that is why I have absolutely no problem supporting my uncle's effort in introducing this legislation. I was not going to comment on the scurrilous remarks about my God. I didn't go.
Member, continue to address the chair.
I have visited Mr. Nygaard's house on one occasion many, many, many years ago. And I have, from what I gathered, he's an ordinary person. He happens to be very wealthy. And this much I do know.
Member.
This is the man. I will not dignify that. The point about this, Mr. Speaker, is that Mr. Nygaard is an extremely wealthy. He has in Canada stem cell research facility activities going on. If he is prepared to spend $30 million in Freeport, Grand Bahama, in establishing a stem cell research facility, that is $30 million more than Grand Bahama currently has being invested in Grand Bahama. And those people who live in Grand Bahama, who are interested in the economic development and well-being of Grand Bahama, should welcome the regulatory framework which is being set up by this enlightened Christie administration, so that they may share in an economy which is growing. And we can say to the other side, it may be that your schizophrenia on this subject is largely because you wish that you had thought of it when you had the opportunity to do it. And now that that opportunity is past, the boat has left the harbor, and we are sorry that you are still ashore, but that is how it is.
Well, the chair recognizes the member for Long Island on the point of order.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I stand this morning. I listened to the member before I got here talk about, but I will deal with that when I give my contribution for today. But now that he is actually inserted into this conversation, his defense of Mr. Nygaard and what is happening, I ask him, Mr. Speaker, to tread very carefully, because there is some very damning information with regards not to stem cell, because it is on the record my feelings on stem cell. But if he wants to talk about Nygaard, I ask him to please tread very carefully. There's the video and everything that he talks about. There is more, and there's very damning evidence that has court documentation to back it up. So please, I caution you.
Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I was unaware.
Member for South Eleuthera, you may continue.
I was unaware of any court proceedings involving
members. Allow the member to wrap up. Allow the member to wrap up. Member for South Eleuthera.
Mr. Speaker, I am unaware of any litigation. I am not.
Members.
I'll be allowed to continue.
Order, members.
Mr. Speaker.
Order, members. Member for South and Central Eleuthera.
Mr. Speaker, I see that my time is up. I close by formally putting on the record that the people of Central and South Eleuthera support wholeheartedly the bill, and I will be voting in favor of the stem cell research and therapy bill. Thank you, Mr.
Thank you. Members. As many. Members. As many. The chair recognizes the honorable member for South Beach. Members. Specifically, the members for Long Island and Golden Gates. The chair recognizes the honorable member for South Beach. Thank you.
Mr. Speaker, as I would like to acknowledge the Almighty God for I am always admonished in all thy ways to acknowledge him, and he shall direct my path, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I am always grateful to the wonderful people of South Beach who I spent the evening last night with. And they had an election there last night. And voted me out for who?
Member for South Beach, address the chair.
Mr. Speaker.
Member for South Beach.
Thank Inspector Senatus and the Urban Renewal South Beach group for accompanying me on my walkabout in Pascal Gardens, Mr. Speaker. And the residents of South Beach have a concern in Pascal Gardens, as in one day, Mr. Speaker, 10 homes were broken into in one day. Everybody in the community knows who does it. Zion Baptist Church at 7 p.m. in their auditorium. Our featured speaker, Ms. Agatha Marcel, the director of the National Training Agency, and we were graciously consented to have the Honorable D. Shane Gibson, the member for Golden Gates, also to speak at that meeting. Now, Mr. Speaker, I tried, Mr. Speaker, to listen to the member for Kalani during his presentation last week and find it somewhat obligatory to focus my attention after the member over and repeatedly hurled insults at the Bahamian people. And what he taught is our inabilities. Mr. Speaker, but I am not surprised. And I know most Bahamians are also not surprised, because the member only verbalized the way the FNM thinks about Bahamians, and for 15 years they held the reign in this country. They governed the people according to the way they thought. Mr. Speaker, more and more it becomes apparent that the FNM never believed in Bahamians. And that is why he can comfortably and effortlessly insult Bahamian people. Mr. Speaker, I say thank God for the PLP. Mr. Speaker, I stand in support of the stem cell research and treatment bill, other word, therapy. During my visit to my constituency, people are asking, what is stem cell and what is it all about? So to seek to give some clarity, stem cells are biological cells found in all multicellular organisms. That's me, you, the sheep, the dog, and everything else. They can divide and separate into various specialized cell types. And they can self-renew to produce more stem cells. There are 3 accessible sources of adult stem cells in human beings. That's the bone marrow, which requires extraction by harvesting. That is drilling the bone, usually in the femur, that large bone in the thigh and your iliac crest. You have the adipose tissue, which is the fatty tissues, which require extraction by liposuction, and the blood, which require extraction by something that is called pheresis, wherein the blood is drawn from the donor, similar to when you're donating blood, passed through a machine that extracts the stem cells and return other portions to the donor. Stem cells have the capacity to regenerate and is capable of developing into other types of cells like kidney cells, liver cells, brain cells, heart cells. Mr. Speaker, stem cells offer much hope for medical advancement because of their ability to grow into almost every kind of cell. The neural cells in the brain and spinal cord that have been damaged can be replaced by stem cells. In treatment for cancer, cells destroyed by radiation and chemotherapy can be replaced with new cells. Whether it's a part of the brain, the liver, the lungs, or whatever, Mr. Speaker. Dead cells of almost any kind, no matter the type of injury or disease, can be replaced with healthy new cells thanks to stem cell research. Mr. Speaker, stem cells can be taken from the umbilical cord just after the birth, and adult stem cells can also be used. But adult stem cells are superior to both umbilical and embryonic stem cells because they are plentiful. There is always an exact DNA match, so the body immune system never rejects it. Just as one may bank his own blood for surgical procedure, stem cells can be banked for further use for that same individual. And the results are always profound and promising. Stem cell research has shown that stem cells have an amazing ability to regenerate all areas of the body, repairing damaged or diseased tissue and curing degenerative disease such as Alzheimer's disease. Studies have shown that stem cells hold the key to reversing the effect of aging and prolonging our lives, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, from those stem cell centers that focus their attention around the adult stem cells, neural stem cells, and cord blood stem cells, there are no moral or ethical questions, as researching and using these stem cells can only lead to progress and medical discoveries that will help us live longer and healthier lives. But there are medical researchers who focus on two types of stem cells, adult and embryonic. And since embryonic stem cell is a protagonist factor, due to the fact of the nature of its genesis, then there is no need to go into the details about it, because it will not be allowed in this country. Therefore, I will focus on the advantages of the adult and umbilical stem cell. Umbilical, 6 in one hand, half dozen in the next, potato. Mr. Speaker, stem cell research and treatment provides medical benefits in fields of therapeutic, duplicating, and regenerative medicine. It provides great potential for discovering treatments and cures to an abundance of disease, as I would have mentioned. Stem cells can help scientists learn about human growth and cell development. Scientists and doctors will be able to test millions of potential drugs and medicine without the use of animals and human testers. This necessitates a process of stimulating the effect of drugs has on specific population of cells. This would tell if the drug is useful or has any problem before giving it to any human being. Mr. Speaker, as I search for the negatives of stem cell research and treatment, I find that the majority of negatives of stem cells are related directly to the embryonic stem cell. And as mentioned by the member of North Andros and the Berry Islands, embryonic stem cells will be prohibited in this country. The use of embryonic stem cells involves the destruction of blastocytes from the laboratory. And I believe, and I'm sure most of us believe in this honorable place, that life begins from conception, and blastocyst is a human life, and to destroy it is immoral and unacceptable. Mr. Speaker, the member for Kalani expressed that he cannot comprehend why we rush to regulate medical research field in which we have no expertise, or why are medical scientists seeking to conduct such sophisticated research in our country without the capacity for research. Mr. Speaker, we are rushing because stem cell research and treatment is presently in our country without regulations today. And it needs to be regulated. Too many of our people are suffering from diseases such as diabetes, arthritis, schizophrenia, Parkinson's disease. If there is a possible way that they can be helped, then why deprive our people from the help they need? Let us then build the capacity and encourage our young medical professionals to go into research and make it more attractive for them, Mr. Speaker. Don't you think we owe that much to our people, Mr. Speaker? The FNM always believed that Bahamians do not deserve anything good. Mr. Speaker, in 1928, when the Scottish biologist, pharmacologist, and botanist Sir Alexander Fleming discovered penicillin, did he have the capacity for research? Mr. Speaker, in 1738, when the Irish midwife named Mary Donnelly performed the first successful emergency cesarean section in the British Isles, did she have the capacity for research? Subsequent research and treatment were carried out, and today the art is perfected. And the member for Kalani can attest to that. He used to do cesarean section in 25 minutes. Mr. Speaker, what about the brain? 7,000 before Christ. Through all the pages of history until now, Mr. Speaker, surgical procedures were perfected through through treatment. And Mr. Speaker, if the earliest scientists had used the same excuse advanced by the member for Kalani, what would have happened with us today? Mr. Speaker, what if the talented surgeons and researchers, such as Hippocrates, the father of the modern medical ethics, Cornelius Celsius and Galenas and Muhammad Razi, these famous scientists, Mr. Speaker, brain scientists, what if they had decided we do not have the capacity? Then what would have happened? Mr. Speaker, my point is, in order to advance as a nation, in order to advance as a people, we must focus our attention on research and treatment. And stem cell research should continue and not be hampered, because it is now effectively being done in Freeport as I speak. During my tenure as a midwife, Mr. Speaker, I witnessed a mother came in for treatment. She was admitted for an alternate disorder. She had one son who used to come and visit her every evening on his way home from work. Mr. Speaker, one evening he came, and he did what he always did. He hugged his mom and said, "How are you doing?" And that mom pushed him away, extended him to her arm's length, and he said, "You look like a good boy, but who may you be?" Mr. Speaker, when you see the effect of Alzheimer's on people, if only for the Alzheimer's, we can have stem cell research in this country, we would have profited. Mr. Speaker, for those of us who value human life from the point of conception, it is encouraging to note that the bill prohibits embryonic stem cells. Mr. Speaker, in 2004, the Stem Cell Research and Treatment Center in Freeport was closed by Marcus Behel. And upon return of the FNM government, it was reopened, and the member for Kalani was Minister of Health during that time. My question to this member is, did Peter Nygaard encourage you to reopen that? Mr. Speaker, if not Peter Nygaard, then who? It stands, since you need some kind of somebody to encourage you to do something. Mr. Speaker, it stands to reason that someone encouraged him to reopen the center. Or is he worried that another research center will compete with the one that he reopened during his tenure? Might I add, without any laws or any regulation. And it functioned for years. And he has the audacity to try to vilify this government, who is doing the right thing by enacting the law. Mr. Speaker, the devil is a liar.
Say it again.
Mr. Speaker, as a practicing midwife, my colleagues and I were given instructions to harvest placenta and collect cord blood to send to the said lab for stem cell research and treatment, which we refused to do, Mr. Speaker. And when the midwives asked my opinion as the union president, I told them, Mr. Speaker, we did not see any written policies. We have not seen any regulation. There was no laws giving us the right to do it. And the mechanism for obtaining permission from the owner of the placenta, which was the mother, was not in place. So we refused. So, Mr. Speaker, when the member for Kalani stand in this honorable place, trying to deceive the Bahamian people with a 13-year-old housekeeping magazine and quoting sections from it that never existed, Mr. Speaker, I view it as dishonest, fraudulent, and deceitful. Mr. Speaker, he should resign. And his deputy should ask him to resign. Mr. Speaker, I would have that member to know the people were not fooled by them before, and they will not be fooled by them again. Mr. Speaker, I make it my mission not to let the Bahamian people to be fooled by the members opposite. Mr. Speaker, the member for Kalani said he has no problem with stem cell research and treatment, but not now. Mr. Speaker, we have just celebrated 40 years of independence as a proud country. What if Sir Cecil Wallace Whitfield, Sir Lyndon Pinlin, Sir Randall Fox, and all the other astute men who represent us at the United Nations advocating for independence, what if they had said, not now? Mr. Speaker, what if the father of our nation had listened to the negative of his time and postponed Social Security, better known as national insurance, and said, not now? Mr. Speaker, what if he had listened to the political pundits because they did not see the vision in the Defense Force and accused him of building Pinlin's army? What if he had said, I know it is the right thing to do, but not now? Mr. Speaker, I could list many other examples of success that this country achieved when our leaders, and I stress the word leaders, did not cringe under the pressure to appease their base. did not listen to the naysayers and those who do not believe in the ability of Bahamians and say, not now. Mr. Speaker, it is appalling that the self-proclaimed progressive thinking leader of Her Majesty official opposition who practice medicine see firsthand the suffering of our people and knows the benefit of stem cell research and treatment can stand in this honorable place and say, not now. If not now, when? I am just asking, Mr. Speaker, is the member by chance linking the funding of stem cell research and treatment directly to this government? Because I heard the member for North Eleuthera mention all of the things that the clinic needs. Does he think this government will be sponsoring the project? Mr. Speaker, if I understood the member for North Angeles and the Berry Islands correctly, the research itself is not a government-sponsored initiative. The government is responsible for the regulation to be put in place so that stem cells can be carried out in this country. Mr. Speaker, I totally agree for once with the member for Kalani that the laws introduced in this honorable place should be enforced, and those unscrupulous persons who violate them should be punished and not paid. And I am possibly advocating that they feel the full weight of the law. Mr. Speaker, just to draw an example, if I can recall correctly, Mr. Speaker, except where a mother's life is at risk, abortion is still illegal in this country. But there are a good number of doctors who made a substantive amount of money from aborting the human fetus. And the only indication noted is IUP, which is the acronym, Mr. Speaker, for intrauterine pregnancy. Mr. Speaker, that is where the fetus is supposed to be safe. Yes, Mr. Speaker, they are not arrested, and they are not charged, and they are not prosecuted. The member knows exactly what he is talking about when he speaks about the enforcement of the laws. He knows there will be clients who are desperate for a cure or any intervention when their lives are compromised, and its very existence depends on it. He knows they will do anything to preserve it. Do you think they will report the doctor who they believe is trying to help them if it is illegal? No, Mr. Speaker, they won't. It is not happening in the cases of abortion at this time, and it will not happen in the case of stem cell research if they believe that it's going to help them. How can you police circumstances such as this, Mr. Speaker? No ethical committee gets between the doctor and his patient. Many doctors have gotten and still is getting away with abortion. As a healthcare professional, I have seen young doctors stagnated who want to do research, or they have to leave their home and go out and build some other person's country because there are no opportunities for research. Mr. Speaker, I have seen how my people suffer due to a lack of progressive research and treatment. So, Mr. Speaker, I stand in full support on behalf of the people of South Beach for the treatment of stem cells in the Bahamas.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Montague.
Research and Therapy Bill. Now, our discussions of this bill, Mr. Speaker, have been, in my view, overshadowed by the intrusion of a larger-than-life individual who seems hell-bent on promoting the bill in support of his own agenda. That intrusion has unfortunately compelled many persons to view this legislation and the issues raised with jaundiced eye. This person has, by his own statements and publications, made it appear to all and sundry that he has the government squarely in his pocket, lock, stock, barrel. Ask and you shall receive. We have all seen the production of Nygaard Takes the Bahamas Back. Nygaard Takes the Bahamas Back. What is he talking about? You've not seen it? I'm sure many out there have not. Watch it on YouTube. And if you are one of the persons who refuse to believe that Nygaard financed the PLP in a major way, you will have no doubt that he did after you have watched that production. PLP ministers of government bowing and scraping like marionettes at Nygaard Key. The only thing they didn't do was kiss some gaudy ring on his hand. The word on the street is that Nygaard financed the PLP to the tune of $5 million. But after you see Nygaard Takes the Bahamas Back, you'd wonder whether that was all he donated. Mr. Nygaard appears to be a very generous individual, and on behalf of those institutions and on behalf of those individuals who he has helped, I would join his benefactors in thanking him. However, those acts of charity do not entitle one to intrude into the affairs of this country. Under an FNM government, this country is not for sale. However, this whole episode is fast-tracking us back to the old days when the international perception was that the Bahamas was indeed a nation for sale. Perhaps that was the taking back to which Mr. Nygaard was referring. Not everyone, Mr. Speaker, Bahamian and non-Bahamians alike, donate to charities within the Bahamas or individuals in need, find it appropriate to boast of their acts of generosity. And no doubt there are individuals who give money to needy causes within the Bahamas far in excess of Mr. Nygaard's gifts and never publicize the facts. I really wonder who would advise Mr. Nygaard to boast his acts of generosities in this gross manner. Sounds to me that he needs a new PR advisor. If Mr. Nygaard wishes to make a meaningful contribution to this country, then I can suggest many areas within the inner city that he can assist in the establishment of community centers where the young can obtain guidance and help with their studies when they cannot study at home because there's no electricity in their house. I can provide a list. But if you see fit to make such a contribution, do it out of the goodness of your heart and not in an atmosphere where it is evident that you want something in return.
Member rises on the point of order.
Mr. Speaker, just for
I recognize the member for Golden Gates.
Just for accuracy, I think it's important to state for the record that I read myself and I spoke to Mr. Nygaard personally. And he has some very close friends in the F&M who associate with him on a regular basis, who visit Nygaard Key just like persons in the PLP. He's been coming to the country now for the past 40 years, as was stated by the Minister, member for Marathon. Has been a permanent resident from 1984. If you listen to members' officers speak, you would think Mr. Nygaard just came in the country sometime over the past 5 years. And so when you look, Mr. Speaker, at this, and so the point is this, the members are attempting to mislead the public into believing that PLP members of Parliament or cabinet ministers are getting some sort of attention that they themselves didn't receive. I don't see any crime in visiting Nygaard Key. I've been visiting there now for the past maybe 20, 25 years, long before I was ever considering being a member of Parliament. You know, and so when you look at their record, Mr. Speaker, and I'm going to speak more of this when I speak later on today, but when you look at their record of criminals who FIU and SIB told them not to give residence in the Bahamas, and despite that, and right now I'm going to table it today, criminals. And they're now trying to be judges for us and talk about integrity. Mr. Speaker, I'll speak that later.
Very well. Member, a member for Montague, you may continue your presentation.
Seems all of that contribution should have been reserved for the member's contribution at a later date.
Members?
If you give a political party $5 million, you're looking for something in return. You're looking for something in return. And it is evident that Mr. Nygaard has a laundry.
Member, just continue to address the chair.
And no doubt, the shopping list will include citizenship, assistance with the acquisition of the seabed surrounding his property at Nygaard Key, which he has occupied, and his stem cell research bill. Now, I was reading the paper this morning, and good member for MyCal, Honorable Alfred Gray, is quoted in here as saying, Mr. Nygaard is a Bahamian. Gray said before he went into a cabinet meeting. He is a philanthropist, and I think he has given more to this country than many other Bahamians, including those who criticize him. Now, I was wondering whether or not he is, in fact, a citizen.
Member rises on the point of order. Member Kelly Gill. The chair recognizes member for Golden Gates.
When I was appointed minister responsible for immigration and was swearing in individuals, I actually swore in individuals who went to school with me, who I thought were Bahamians. Because all my life I knew them to be living in the Bahamas. And so obviously it must be some sort of mistake where because Mr. Nygaard, of his popularity, because of the interaction, because of the time he spent in the Bahamas, individuals, you listening? Individuals sometimes, Mr. Speaker, would obviously assume that he must be a Bahamian. To the best of my knowledge, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Nygaard is a permanent resident. I have no knowledge of him being a Bahamian citizen.
Thank you for the clarification. Member for Montague, you may continue.
Well, Mr. Speaker, in fact, I don't know that's clarification. That seems to be the member's view, because the other cabinet minister...
Member for yield, member for Montague, kindly yield. Member for Golden Gates.
Speaker, the fact of the matter is Mr. Nygaard is not a Bahamian citizen. He is a permanent resident in the Bahamas.
Thank you, member.
Well, it seems it would be helpful if the government, in fact, could clarify this, because there's been a lot of talk. The member has indicated he thinks that he's a permanent resident, but here we have a cabinet minister stating categorically that he is a Bahamian citizen. Now, this isn't the first time this has been said. I believe Mr. Nygaard himself appeared on a program. It was also stated at that program that he was a Bahamian. Right. So I think in the interest of the public, I think the government needs to clarify this, because if he's not, then fine, but it needs to be stated exactly. I think it's significant enough that the government should indicate it. If he's not, then fine. But
members, honorable members. The chair will not allow the member for Long Island and the member for Golden Gate to continue this exchange. Member for Montague, you may continue.
Speaker, thank you. Well, I think in light of all that has been occurring here within the last few weeks concerning this individual, I think it imperative that the government states its position, because if Mr. Gray, the member for Mical, is correct, then this, I think, points to this whole issue, that here the man is making substantial contributions to the PLP, and he is buying his influence, it would seem, and if he is granted citizenship, I think this is something that the people in this country...
Point of order. The chair, member yields. The chair recognizes the member for Golden Gates.
Speaker, we cannot have the member misleading this place. And he made a point earlier that I think he needs to rescind it, because
your microphone, member.
He needs to rescind it because he said earlier about some $5 million being contributed to the PLP.
Yeah. Yes, the member said that it was said in the street. It was a conjecture.
Well,
it was an opinion.
No, Mr. Speaker, no, I just want to say that there's no $5 million. There's no Progressive Liberal Party. Yeah. Yeah, and also the streets told me, Mr. Speaker, people on the streets told me that Aga Khan gave them $10 million.
Very well.
And that's why he was allowed to dredge Bell Channel, because of the $10 million they got.
Thank you, honorable members. Yep, we're not going to allow hearsay evidence in here. Members. Members. Show respect in here. I've been standing for the last few seconds and nobody seems to just ignore. We're not going to allow hearsay evidence in this place. It's an honorable chamber. So let's not get to that level. Thank you. Member for Montague.
Thank you, Mr. Problem. Mr. Nygaard is no stranger to litigation. It almost seems as if he encourages it by seeing how far he can push the envelope. In one of his latest YouTube contributions, when he takes his entourage into Baintown, in which he attempts to confront the Reverend C. frequent the litigation concerning his neighbor with whom he is in court. Apart from his antics being inappropriate, it seems evident that he seeks to have the matter tried in the court of public opinion, in the belief that he can buy support by broadcasting his acts of charity. He should have learned, Mr. Speaker, from previous donors that to the PLP, that after they finish milking you, and Harachi is a clear example, they goosed him and
finish milking? Yeah, well, that's not going to be allowed. Thank you. The member yields. The chair recognizes members. The chair recognizes the member for Bain Grandson.
The member said something about after the PLP is finished milking you.
Yes, yes. The chair takes issue with that,
member to withdraw that statement.
In the strongest way. Thank you, honorable member. Yes. Member for Montague. Inappropriate commentary. The chair orders you to withdraw it, and I order that it be expunged from the record.
Very well, Mr. Speaker. Well, after they finish using him.
Man, that's not appropriate. Withdraw the statement, member for Montague.
Very well, Mr. Speaker. They know what I'm talking
No,
about.
ma'am, no, that's unequivocal. It's not going to happen. Member for Montague, withdraw that honorably.
I said they know
What do you
I'm
withdraw,
talking
member
about.
for Montague?
It's on it, Mr. Speaker.
Very well. Continue.
Right. Well, I was saying they goosed him and sent him on his way. And I'm not talking about the feathered kind. In the CB Moss tape.
Member for Montague, the member stands on a point of order. The chair recognizes the member for Bain and Grandstand.
It appears that members of that side think it's funny, but it's not. We know what he means when he say they juiced him.
Especially him.
Mr. Speaker, I ask you to have him withdraw the remark and to cease and desist.
Very well. Thank you, honorable member. Member for Montague, the chair asks that you withdraw the remarks. You withdrew. Cease and desist from the commentary that intends to be insulting.
No intent to insult.
No intent to insult. Continue, honorable member.
In the CB Moss tape, Nygaard goes on to make unfounded allegations that the previous administration was corrupted by his neighbor, which I guess is his attempt to justify his present actions. This is the usual PLP tactic. You seek to cast aspersions on the other party, which someone in their mind would justify their actions. Mr. Nygaard goes on to infer that he gave donations to both political parties, which is clearly untrue. His largesse was delivered in one direction, and that is to the PLP. And while $5 million or whatever he donated may be pocket change to him, it is quite capable of buying an election in this country. We are unable to...
The member stands on a point of order. Member for Montague, yield.
One thing is difficult for me to disagree with him about, because he knows what it takes to buy elections. That is in his DNA.
Members, we're not going to get into that back and forth about who buys elections. So member for Montague, in the interest of civility in this place, I would rather members in here not speak of buying elections. Member for Montague, you may continue.
We are unable to recognize, Mr. Speaker, the future leaders of this country without interjecting Mr. Nygaard into the program. At a recent event at which 40 Bahamians under the age of 40 were to be honored by Jones Communication, it was decided appropriate to give a special award to Mr. Nygaard to recognize his contribution to the youth of the nation. And the award, in my view, overshadowed the entire proceedings. Mr. Nygaard's entourage, which included a team of photographers, videoed the entire proceedings, and following Mr. Nygaard's 15-minute or so speech, tracing his rise from slavery under the Russians in his native Finland to the present-day mogul that he now is. The Prime Minister had earlier in the program put his blessing on Nygaard's contribution to the Bahamas, which occupied what seemed like half of his speech. You really had to be left wondering whether the occasion was really one recognizing 40 of the future leaders of the country, or Mr. Nygaard for his largesse. It was considered important to acknowledge Mr. Nygaard's contribution to the country or to persons within the community. This was neither the time nor the place to make such an award. And it is occasions such as this.
Point of order, the chair recognizes the member for Golden Gates.
Mr. Speaker, from my recollection of this event that took place last week, this was sponsored and hosted by JCN, Mr. Wendell Jones. and of Jones Communication, I don't understand why it is that the members opposite want to make it appear as though we were the ones, the government, were actually spearheading this entire event. I mean, you can't, if Mr. Nygaard contributed $10 million to various charities and individuals from the time he was here in the Bahamas, why is it you want to hold it against him? What is this jealousy all about? And I mean, in some cases, Mr. Speaker, the monies he donated was the difference between persons dying and living. Obviously, Mr. Speaker, side opposite have a big difficulty with Bahamians benefiting from a man like Mr. Nygaard.
Thank you, Honourable Member. Point of order, member for Montague, member for Long Island.
I stand here very soberly. I attended the event. This is the event of which we speak. The event, Mr. Speaker, was not a private event that was hosted solely by Jones Communication. The tickets and all of the proposals said it was in conjunction with no less than the Ministry of Youth, Sports, and Community, or whatever their youth is, culture. And further to that, Mr. Speaker, there were other sponsors of this. It was also an official part of the 40th anniversary celebrations of our independence.
Thank you,
You're
Honourable
saying
Member.
it was a private thing. It was
Member for Montague, you may continue.
Mr. Speaker, I find it odd that members' office seem to like to take every opportunity to suggest that it's not acknowledging generosity of someone like Mr. Nygaard and thanking him for it. The issue is this. This was not an appropriate place at which to honor the man. If you wish to honor him, find some other function at which he would be honored. And no doubt he would be entitled to all the praises that this government and institutions wish to give him. But when you are honoring 40 young Bahamians under 40 with regard to their contribution to the country and looking on them as the future leaders of this country, don't go and have an award to someone who's not a Bahamian or maybe is a Bahamian and have that overshadow the entire proceeding. It appeared more as if it was a acknowledgement of Mr. Nygaard's contribution far more than an acknowledgement of the future leaders of this country and recognizing them as the future leaders. That is what I'm talking about. I'm not suggesting I'm jealous or opposing the man giving to the Bahamas. Very glad that he has. I'm very grateful for it, and I'm sure the whole country is grateful. But you don't go and give substantial sums of money and look upon it as if that entitles you to something. And entitlement is going to be something we're going to find out if this young man was granted citizenship or if a special favor is granted him with regard to his occupation of Bahamian land without authority, and we'll see what happens there. Nobody allowed it to happen. No previous administration allowed it to happen.
We told him to fix it.
And it is occasions such as that very one which leave one wondering whether he has all or some of the leaders in his pocket. If members opposite wish to talk foolishness, they could understand this whole issue with regard to his occupation of the seabed, which he is not entitled to, is something which has been a thorn in the side of this previous government, and they've endeavored to do something about it. If the present government have indicated they're prepared to accept it, he's been told to move it. That is what has happened. So when one debates this bill, it is unfortunately, as I said, it's sort of, the whole thing is overshadowed by this man's contribution. It really and makes one concerned that this is simply pushing for his own personal agenda. That is what the concern is. But this side, Mr. Speaker, have intimated they are not opposed to stem cell. It is looked on and regarded as perhaps the future in medicine. Now, after receiving a biological lesson from my friend behind the South Beach, I don't, there's nothing that any of us could say with regard to the biological aspects of this bill. But what is the concern of this side, Mr. Speaker, is whether there are proper regulations in place. And that is something that is incumbent on this government, on this country, to ensure that they are in place before we allow the doctors, the scientists to start fooling with human life. And that is something that we have to make sure that that is all in place before this bill is passed.
The ones who approved the people in Grand Bahamas, I don't understand that. I mean, you're all talking like y'all ain't do nothing.
So in that regard, Mr. Speaker, until those issues are addressed, I do not find it possible to support this bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Honourable Member. As many. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Bamboo Town. The member yields. The Chair recognizes the Honourable Member for Bain and Grandstand.
I moved out. Spend until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
Do we have a second? It has been moved and seconded that the business of this House suspends until 3 p.m. this afternoon. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The business of this House suspends until 3 p.m. this afternoon.
To adequately cover this whole stem cell regime, and of course the government through its presenters, like the member for Central and South Eleuthera and the member for Marathon, the Minister of Education, pointing out that the first approval in principle and the reason that this whole stem cell issue arose is that a company was given approval in principle in Grand Bahama, and it came to the attention of the cabinet, and it had to be addressed by the government. Of course, Prime Minister Christie, according to Minister Fitzgerald, directed them to go ahead and find out what was going on before they could even begin to think about giving approvals for any of this. Again, the member for South Beach is expected. The member for Bamboo Town, the member for South Beach presented earlier. The member for Bamboo Town is expected to be on the floor when members return to the House at 3 o'clock this afternoon, when we expect that the bill on this stem cell research and therapy will be completed. But again, from the way it's going, we don't know what's going to happen. Again, the whole issue of Peter Nygaard being injected into this debate on stem cell research, back and forth, again, the Speaker having to really get involved. But again, we'll see what happens when members return at 3 o'clock this afternoon to continue this debate on stem cell research and therapy. So on behalf of the team here at the Parliamentary Channel, I'm Anthony Newbold. Enjoy the rest of your afternoon.